Hi everyone, welcome back to Asperger's from the Inside. You're here with Paul. I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism, so make sure you hit subscribe to get the latest content. Today's video is on the pros and cons of being your authentic autistic self. So it's kind of funny that a lot of advice that I heard when I was growing up, at least, was something along the lines of be yourself, there's no one else like you, better to be a good version of yourself than a poor imitation of someone else. And that's all well and good, but a Simpsons episode comes to mind where Lisa gets that same advice, just be yourself, I'm sure people will love you. And she says, be myself? I've been myself my entire life and it hasn't worked. And the temptation in that moment is to think, well, that clearly hasn't worked. Therefore, I have no choice but to try something else. And when we're stuck in the dynamic of do I be myself or do I pretend, then the only other option is to try and figure out what kind of persona I can create for myself so that I can achieve my probably mostly social and inclusion goals. I want to make friends, I want to have a job, I want to find a partner, I want to have a nice life and get along with other people. And when I am myself and I do not have success socially, that's a very, very strong internal motivation to try something different. So I'm going to offer a different strategy today. Rather than changing yourself, what we want to do instead is learn about the situation so that we can change our strategy of how I, myself, my true authentic self, interacts with the rest of the world. Rather than changing myself to fit in with the rest of the world, I'm going to play with that middle ground of what can I do so that I can be accepted for who I am without having to mask anything that is a core part of me. So it's absolutely essential that I need people to accept me, right? The other extreme reaction to this is to say, I don't need any friends. I'm going to just be by myself. Trying to make friends is too hard. Trying to have a job is too hard. Everything is too hard. I'm just going to rely on myself. That's not really a feasible option in most cases. And often that is a reaction to the fact that it feels impossible. Why should I bother trying to connect with other people when I've already tried so hard and already had such little success? So if I accept that I do genuinely need other people, I need friends are not an optional extra, then I need to find a way to make friends and be myself at the same time. None of this either or stuff. I need both. So a concept that I find helpful here is to find a socially appropriate version of my true self. And it helps me to recognize that people aren't going to see everything about me. Even people like yourselves, you see a part of me, it's not a fake facade, but it's like a slice. It's like taking one slice of a loaf of bread. It's really truly that loaf of bread, but it's not the whole thing. It's just a tiny little slice of it. So it can be authentic even if it's not the whole story. So when I start focusing on that, I can choose which parts of my true self to bring to any given situation. And so long as I also acknowledge and incorporate all the parts that I've left behind, and they're still within me, I'm just choosing not to bring them to the surface at the moment, then that is a fairly effective way to conceptualize the difference between being socially appropriate and masking my true self. So there are some parts of me that are so integral to who I am that trying to suppress them for any length of time would just feel disingenuous. So I'm going to want to find people who can accept me, especially my personality, for who I am most of the time and give myself as much freedom as possible. And the advantage to bringing my true self to a situation is that I'm going to find out pretty quickly who is attracted to me and who is not very interested in me. And the people that find me interesting are going to be the people that are more likely to accept me for who I am and to not ask me to be different. If I've already shown them a little bit of myself and they've liked the little bit that they've seen, then I can slowly show them more and more and slowly get to know them and build that connection in that kind of way. A trap that a lot of us fall into is something called compartmentalization, where I am a certain way with a certain group of people, and then it's almost like I have an entirely new life, and this second group knows nothing about the first group, and there's not really very much overlap there. There was some research done. I'd look up kitestring.org. They've got a fantastic resource on making and keeping modern friends in the making and keeping long-term friendships in the modern world, or something like that. And they found that to build a strong friendship requires multiple different connections. So not only do I know you because I play tennis with you on the weekend, but you're also in my university class, and you also know my other friends, and you also know my kids, or our kids go to the same school, or something like that. And we've got lots of different types of connections to the one person, which means that when one of those connections breaks or just goes away, for example, let's say we're no longer in the same university class, for example, we can still be friends even though life moves on, because we've got multiple different points of connection. So when we inadvertently bring only a very small slither of ourselves to a particular situation, and we never expand that out to let those people know about the other parts of our lives, then that's actually holding those people at a distance. We've compartmentalized this friendship into only this little small section of my life, and that has created a barrier for the person to get to know me properly. It's also created a barrier for me to bring any of the other parts of my life into that world. Now, there's a certain level of this which is inevitable. I mean, when I was working in an office, I had an entire personal life that most of the people in the office didn't really know many of the details about. But if I had been very strict about that, and I had never mentioned any of my extra work activities with my friends or my family, then eventually that would have become a barrier, because we expect that when we spend a lot of time with people, we slowly get to know them a little bit more, and we learn that they have a holiday house, or we learn that they have, a wife and kids, or we learn that they love to go cycling on the weekend, or just these tiny little things of these little snippets of information from a compartment that is different to the one that I'm in at the moment, to slowly bridge the gap, so that barrier between that we might have inadvertently erected to compartmentalize our lives is just a little bit more porous and doesn't seem quite so rigid. So it might be hard to bring my authentic self to a situation, especially when it's a little bit different to what is expected. But ultimately, it's the only way for me to build a genuine connection with the people around me. If I am constantly masking and filtering and holding back an important part of myself, then I'm not allowing myself to connect with those people. And I'm not allowing any kind of relationship to build up there. And in the beginning, this feels like self-preservation because there's risking rejection. If I show someone who I really am, maybe they might not like that and they might not want to talk to me or have quite as much to do with me in the future. But risking that connection, risking that rejection is the only way to get a yes rather than a no. If I do not ask the question, I get neither a yes nor a no. It's like asking someone to marry you, right? If you never ask, you never get a yes and you never get a no, right? Whereas if you do ask and you get a no, that might be devastating, but at least you know that you have to look for someone else if this person is not going to be your friend or not going to be your partner. So in that sense, risking a yes, asking the question, allowing myself to be either accepted or rejected is the only way to truly allow myself to gain that acceptance, ironically, by risking the rejection. Anyway, so I should wrap it up there, but the key message here is that I can be my authentic autistic self and connect to other people at the same time if I learn how the society works, if I learn about human emotions and human reactions and how relationships work. I can find good strategies so that I can bring my true authentic self to a situation and be successful socially and be accepted in that situation at the same time. If we imagine that it's an either or situation, then we're going to lose whichever one we give up, because we need both of these things. We need to be authentic to ourselves, and we also need to be successful, at least in some part, to have some friends and some social connections and things like that as well. So maybe you've experienced this. If you've been masking for a very long time, the negative effects of masking increase slowly and slowly over time. And while it might not have been a big problem 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it's going to be a much bigger problem today than it was then, and 10 years from now it's going to be an even bigger problem. So the sooner we can learn to start slowly taking the barriers down and making and risking that rejection to also risk the acceptance and inclusion, we can start learning to be our authentic self and have success socially at the same time. So we all know that there are pros and cons. The pro is essentially we risk being accepted and included and having successful relationships. And the con is that we risk the rejection, and we need to be clever and understanding about what strategies we're using, because chances are, if you have not had much success in the past, doing the same thing again will probably lead to a similar result. That's not rocket science. Anyway, so I should probably leave it there, but thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you again next week.